Hi everyone, it's August 2020 now and the world keeps fighting against COVID-19. Global economies and industries are adjusting to the new reality and marketers on Apple Search Ads have to do that as well. This report was made by SearchAdsHQ to understand how Apple Search Ads is affected by the pandemic, especially in Q1 and Q2 2020. The results that I'm going to present to you are based on the aggregated data of app publishers linked to our platform. The minimum sample size is 8 apps and 3.1 million impressions, though we only have these little impressions in one category, photo and video. The rest are from 6.7 million to 174 million impressions. We analyzed downloads and CPA. Both metrics are calculated in two variants: data by days and a weighted average of 7 days, which is marked as a trend. We haven't detected dramatic changes in the pool of our clients, so we can be pretty sure that this research reflects the changes in the market. To understand the changes, we looked into the most impacted countries. As you know, coronavirus was spreading in waves or phases. China was the first country to be affected, but in this research we left out China because obviously Apple Search Ads is unavailable there. So which countries we focused on? South Korea, Japan and Italy. We added these countries to one group called the second phase countries affected. The other group, the third phase countries affected, includes the United States, the UK, Spain, France and Germany. The fourth phase countries group includes India, Peru, Chile, Mexico, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, South Africa, Qatar and Colombia. To understand the impact of coronavirus on Apple Search Ads, we researched 6 App Store category groups. You can see them in this slide. These are games, work from home, which includes education, business and utilities, photo and video, health and fitness, finance, and the last category group combining travel, transportation and booking. Before we look at specific categories, these are global downloads that resulted from Apple Search Ads. In this chart, you can see that the number of COVID-19 cases grows here together with the number of app downloads. Here's the trend. In their report, App Annie says that in Q2, the use of apps increased by 40% against the previous year. They call it a new all-time record. Just to compare, in Q1 it was only 20%, which shows that the pandemic has radically changed the way people interact and that the world is definitely going mobile. Now let's see what happens in gaming. In this slide you can see the sample size of apps that we researched. Many people were isolating and out of a sudden got a lot of time to play games. App Annie reported that the use of mobile games in Q2 2020 increased by 40% year on year. Here are our findings for global Apple Search Ads downloads in gaming. You can see a direct correlation between the number of new COVID cases here and the number of downloads. This is the trend. Now let's look at the chart on the left. It shows downloads in South Korea, Japan, and Italy. In Q2, the number of downloads dropped compared to Q1, together with the number of new COVID cases. Still, the number of downloads exceeds the pre-pandemic period. As for CPA in this country group, the chart on the right, in Q2 it's $2.29. The cost increased by 70% compared to Q1, and the reason can be that many publishers use pretty aggressive strategies to win the demand, which is obviously present in the market now. Moving on to the third phase countries, I have to point that the pandemic began a little later here. New coronavirus cases have not yet decreased to a minimum, and game downloads are steadily growing. In the chart on the right, you can see the uptrend for CPA. Average CPA in Q2 increased compared to Q1 and to the pre-COVID period. You can see the numbers on the slide. It is likely that during the pandemic, user LTV has considerably increased. As a result, the break-even Apple Search Ads spend went up, which makes a higher cost reasonable. In the fourth phase countries, we can see a rather flat upward trend in downloads. Compared to Q1, the average number of downloads increased by 11% in Q2. Why? The reason can be that these countries are less popular with marketers on Apple Search Ads. CPA in these countries, shown in the chart on the right, increased by 57% against Q1. Due to the fact that LTV has grown in other regions, some advertisers probably decided to compete for volume in the niche markets, which boosted the cost. Moving on to work-from-home apps, first of all, I'd like to show you the sample size we researched for this category. The pandemic is the golden era for remote work apps. I'm not going to delve into this too much. This is pretty obvious. I'm just going to show you the chart that illustrates that the number of Apple Search Ads downloads increased globally. You can see that the demand for work-from-home apps was especially strong during the hardest lockdowns here. Overall, there is a direct correlation between the number of new coronavirus cases and the degree of lockdown, obviously, and the number of downloads for apps in this category. In South Korea, Italy, and Japan, the downloads chart looks as follows. You can see it on the left. Compared to Q1, the downloads trend has fallen, but keeps above the pre-pandemic period. As for CPA in Q2, it decreased by 13% compared to Q1. Strong demand for work-from-home apps helped publishers attract multiple users without allocating big budgets on ads. In third phase countries, downloads follow the same typical sawtooth pattern here, where the downloads trend in Q2 is below that in Q1 here, but higher compared to the pre-COVID period. As for CPA, the chart on the right, Here we see a decrease again, both against the pre-pandemic period and against the Q1. In the fourth phase countries, you can see that the same sawtooth pattern here for downloads. In the chart on the right, you can see the CPA trend. It decreased by 10% in Q2 compared to Q1 and amounted to 0.73. Overall, work-from-home apps have been searched for more often during the pandemic. Their organic traffic boosted, and advertisers respond to this in different ways. Some of them benefit from the boost and switch to other ads channel. Others keep using Apple Search Ads, and due to the increased search traffic, the ad spend turns to be lower. In such conditions, we can expect the market to come to the optimal cost at some point. Now let's take a look at the photo and video category. Here's the sample size we researched. What can we say about this app category? People keep communicating using visuals, but the content of their posts has slightly changed. On their social media, they post more vacation memories, more selfies, but the volume of the image-based content is increasing. In this slide, you can see that there's been an uplift in worldwide downloads for photo and video apps. Compared to the pre-pandemic period, the total number of downloads increased by a factor of 2.5. However, CPAs across all locations dropped. I'll show it to you on the next slides. Now look at the chart on the left. These are downloads of photo and video apps in South Korea, Italy and Japan. You can see a drop starting from May from May that goes along with the decrease in the COVID-19 cases. This drop can probably be explained by the fact that people started to meet offline. CPA, shown in the chart on the right, fell by 40% in Q2 against Q1. This indicates that the industry is quickly adapting to the changes caused by COVID-19, and the search traffic increases, which reduces CPA. Now let's look at the situation in the third phase countries. In the downloads chart on the left, there's a smooth but significant increase. CPA in turn follows the downtrend that's been in place since the beginning of the year. In fact, it's down by 50% compared to the pre-pandemic period. Let's move on to the fourth phase countries. The left chart shows the uptrend in downloads and a distinct correlation with the new COVID-19 cases. By the way, we detected the most significant growth in downloads in the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean region. How can we explain such a growth in downloads? It's very likely that global players are exploring the new geographic region, plus new players appear on the market. Another explanation can be changes in consumer behavior caused by the new normal. Now pay attention to a very low average CPA in Q2, $0.33. but after a sharp drop in March, which was caused by strong downloads uptrend, CPA is returning to normal, it's reviving. Moving on to health and fitness. First of all, I'd like to show you the sample size. Health and fitness is another category of mobile apps that flourished and became more diverse, I would say. Many publishers are adjusting their fitness apps to the new normal. They offer online training options with an instructor, special training programs and stuff like that. This category is closely related to the trend in new coronavirus cases in terms of global downloads, which can be seen in this chart. At the same time, the average CPA decreased across all countries due to the rapidly growing demand for fitness apps. We're going to look at this further. We discovered that in South Korea, Japan and Italy, there was a spike in downloads of fitness apps when coronavirus cases peaked here. A sharp decline at the beginning of the pandemic, followed by a sharp increase starting from March. What was the reason? It's likely that some publishers took, let's say, a wait-and-see approach in order to find ways to adapt to the new market. In the right chart, you can see that CPA is decreasing compared to the pre-pandemic period. With such a strong demand for this category, mobile publishers don't have to spend a lot on ads to attract users. The third phase countries are experiencing a stable growth in downloads of health and fitness apps, even when the number of new cases is dropping. CPA in the right chart decreased just like in the second phase countries by about 30% compared to the pre-pandemic period. Let's move on to the fourth phase countries. They faced the pandemic later on, but they are also beginning to experiment with the new health and fitness apps. Downloads peaked at the beginning of this summer, and now they are returning to the pre-pandemic level. As for CPA, a smooth downward trend persists, and the average in Q2 is about $1, 0.9. Now let's take a look at financial apps. Here's the sample size that we researched across 3 country groups. The use of financial apps is hitting a record. There's market volatility and economic uncertainty takes place. More and more banks and other financial institutions are definitely going in line. All these factors contribute to the growing number of financial app downloads. In this chart, you can see the upward trend, which grows along with the number of new COVID-19 cases. Now look at the downloads chart for the second phase countries. There's a strong upward trend here, despite the fact that the pandemic peaked and full lockdowns were lifted. This uptrend indicates the growing demand for finance-related apps. The average CPA in these countries increased compared to Q1 and the average CPA before the pandemic. This situation implies that the search traffic and competition for it keep growing. In the third phase countries that were hit by the pandemic slightly later, we can see a gradual but very stable increase in the number of financial app downloads. In the chart on the right, the average CPA in these countries remains pretty unchanged, hovering around $5.98. In the fourth phase countries, we can observe a very interesting situation. There was a dramatic drop in downloads in the beginning of COVID. You can see it here. After that, the industry adjusted to the new normal. Fluctuations in downloads are significant. You can see what they look like. App marketers are only exploring Apple Search Ads in the fourth phase countries. And it's pretty likely that there was a temporary pause of ads, of ad campaigns for apps in this category here. That's it for downloads. And as for the average CPA, it keeps gradually growing because marketers are slowly exploring the countries in this group. The last category that we are going to explore is travel. In this slide, you can see the sample size that we researched. We offer the worldwide data only for this category. The thing is that there are many local apps and ride-sharing services in our sample, so it would be incorrect to compare the metrics by countries. So we've seen a decline in downloads from the beginning of the pandemic. Keep in mind that our sample includes apps unrelated to international travel. The drop would be much more significant if the sample included only flight booking and other apps for international travel. Downloads increased by 20% against the pre-coronavirus period and by 14% against Q1. As for CPA, it decreased by 65% against the pre-pandemic period, which indicates that marketers for travel apps are lowering budgets for their Apple Search Ads campaigns. That's an overview of the COVID-19 impact on Apple Search Ads in Q1 and Q2 2020. Now I'd like to summarize the main findings. COVID-19 shapes the new normal. Apps are no longer a nice to have, they are a must. And this context caused an incredible growth in some mobile app categories, although some of them, such as travel and booking, have frozen or are in decline. Work from home, fitness, and photo and video apps are in strong demand, and this strong demand helps increase downloads with a lower CPA. In gaming, CPA is growing along with the growing demand. This is an indicator of a steady growth trend in search traffic and competition for it, especially in the US and such rapidly growing markets as Japan and China. Finance. Here, the number of downloads across all country groups has dramatically grown. The reason behind is a growing digitalization in banking and demand for finance-related apps. Travel, transportation and booking. This category is obviously in decline. advertisers are sticking to conservative Apple Search Ad strategies. However, there are apps in a better position. These are local tourism, ride sharing, and other apps that are not related to international travel. In the second phase countries, which are South Korea, Japan, and Italy, that experienced they experienced more restrictive measures in Q1, and the metrics have changed more significantly. Although the restrictive measures were lifted, the number of downloads remains significantly large. The thing is that most people and companies keep sticking to social distancing, and we can speak about changes in habits such as wider adoption of online banking. The third phase countries. The peak of the disease in this country group happens later, hence a small lag between the second and the third phase countries. Overall, we can observe accumulation and effect where each subsequent stage of the pandemic reinforces the previous trends. And last but not least, the fourth phase countries. The quarantine measures there were not that restrictive compared to other country groups, so they turned out to be less dependent on the COVID impact. CPA is very much low on average compared to other country groups, as competition is not so harsh there. Well, that brings me to the end of my presentation. If you have any questions or feedback on this report, reach out to me via the email you can see on your screen. To have the written version of this report, go to the description of this video. There you will find a link to download your copy of this COVID-19 report. Thanks for listening and have a lovely day.